Hello, I'm Mike Graham, president of Midwestern Securities and the host of the Banking on Growth podcast. Welcome. With us today, we have our friend Jim Perry, who is a senior strategist at Market Insights. Welcome, Jim. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Mike. Glad to be with you.
Thankful you're here. Will you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your company does?
Sure. Market Insights has been around now for about 30 years. I've been with them for about 20 of those, which is hard to believe. As a senior strategist, we're a consulting firm that works primarily with community-based institutions around the United States. We've had the privilege of working with probably close to 500 or so community banks and credit unions over these last years, really helping them do the same thing you're destined to work on here, which is helping them grow, finding new ways for them to look at their market data, their customer data, or member data as a better way to anchor their strategy. And it's been amazing to think about how our company has changed over the last, 25, 30 years. It used to be, we were all about helping people find out where to put the next branch. We don't do quite so much of that anymore, maybe once in a while. But it's all about helping with strategy. Giving that outside perspective, as you know, can be very valuable sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. I love the way that you just introduced that, because I think so many times when we talk about community banks and credit unions, we're thinking Main Street America. We're thinking very close to the customers. And sometimes we think old-fashioned, right? That may be a visual that comes to mind.
Sure.
But it can't be. It has to be aggressive and evolving to keep up and keep ahead of consumer tastes. I remember we've been working with community banks since 2006. We'd been calling on community banks for a few years prior to that. Mm-hmm. But in the early 2000s, maybe call it 2004, Bank of America was going to build a branch in every small town. That was their business expansion strategy.
Exactly.
And then here came State Farm, which is 35 miles to the east of us, who became, I think, the fifth largest bank basically overnight without ever building a branch, and changed the business model entirely. Mm-hmm. And that's when we started calling on community banks and said, do you see how quickly this is changing and how this is moving around you? But you bring that up. Great introduction. Will you tell our audience where you're at and what you just wrapped up this week?
Oh, sure. My pleasure. I've been in New York City all this week at Finnovate Fall, which is the second of two conferences here in the United States. There's one in Europe as well. And the one in San Francisco was held in the spring. And this rather large conference was here in New York City during the fall. During the course of this conference, I had the privilege of actually leading a panel discussion around the issue of financial inclusion, which is something I'm very passionate about, something that I think there are a lot of opportunities for community-based institutions to kind of recalibrate how they approach low to moderate income consumers. And we had a very lively panel, had some venture capitalists on the panel helping think about how bringing new fintech partnerships into banking communities can help, again, expand access to some of the basic products and services. But in addition to that panel, there were some incredible speakers, fantastic panels, and about 50 demos from fintechs that have the latest and greatest and most interesting applications that they're making available now and pitching to the financial services community. What is marvelous about the model of this program is they all have just 7 minutes. That's all. They've got to make the pitch in 7 minutes. If not, a huge gong goes off, said, sorry, folks, your time is off. And then you've got to do the walk of shame across the stage. But some really brilliant ways to help all financial institutions be more efficient, be more compliant, be safer, be more competitive. It's just an exciting time in this industry. And the thing that I always tell bankers is don't underestimate how quickly things are moving, how quickly things are changing. I think for the bankers that were at this conference, especially if they hadn't been around that kind of massive exposure to some of the innovation that's underway right now, you don't realize how quickly things are moving.
I think that this whole discussion is going to be about the pace of change, the way that you kind of started it. So we think it's a great, community financial institutions have so many advantages from being close to the customer, having those relationships, demonstrating care, loyalty, fiduciary behavior to help those that they're involved with. And they need to keep doing that. And they need to evolve and look for new technologies, new service models, understand new consumer tastes, and keep ahead. Are there 2 or 3 items from this conference that jump out to you as things that most community banks should have on their radar and should follow up with?
One of the things that's becoming more possible several years back when Finnovate started doing these meetings, I think it was a time when there was a great deal more direct competition between the fintech environment and the fintech ecosystem and the banking system generally. And I believe a lot of community bankers began to look at fintech strictly as a competitor, as opposed to a partner, as opposed to a vendor that could actually help them deliver products and services in a more efficient, more timely, more seamless kind of way, and often more affordable way. But I think that's really changed now. I think there's an acknowledgement that there are new tools available that can really make a difference. There was one, as an example, there's a company called ECO, EKO. It's a white label product that would essentially bring the same kind of investment platform that you have with like Robinhood or some of the digital-only investment products or applications that could be embedded directly into your own digital banking platform. So that, imagine if your small community bank feels like it's really losing part of the customer relationship because of apps like Robinhood and all the rest that allow an entry point for some of those lower investors, the folks who only have $100 to invest, or $200 or $1,000 or even $10,000, but to give them a way to do that within your institution as opposed to taking that outside. That was one of the things that I thought was pretty amazing. There was another one called Illuma Shield, which is a caller identification program. And at a time for call centers right now where fraud is running so high, being able to voice identify someone is an incredible tool. Especially, one of the things I loved about the demo was they actually used a deep fake of an individual's voice to show how the system can actually identify those and catch those and increase that security. It kind of also takes steps out of that caller verification process. If you can reduce that time by like 85, 90%, you're going to have a better customer experience. So it was kind of exciting to see that kind of technology. There was another program, and I'm trying to remember, Identify, which was a data cleansing, data verification program. I think one of the greatest challenges for community-based institutions right now is that in order to really leverage some of these new digital tools, you've got to have your data house in order. You've got to have the customer data, all of that information. You can't rely on having a mortgage banker keeping most of his information on an Excel spreadsheet somewhere, and you've got your CRM over here. And, this is about bringing your data in, making sure it's clean data, because when you have that, some of these, especially the AI-driven tools, are really, you need to have that clean data source. So those are just, a couple of the highlights from a conference like this. And one of the things that I enjoy about Finnovate, within probably the next 2 or 3 weeks, through their YouTube channel, they'll actually bring up all of those 7-minute demos. So it gives it kind of democratizes the process a little bit and gives everybody an opportunity to learn what's out there.
Yeah, very interesting. I imagine you come back with a head full of notes, a head full of things that I need to follow up with and make sure that it doesn't just go in one ear and out the other, that I figure out a way to implement this or share this. I know coming back from conferences like that, our staff is always a little bit overwhelmed the next couple of weeks because I'm just sharing and dumping information and to say we made connections, let's follow up and let's keep growing and keep learning.
Absolutely. That's one of the things I need a ChatGPT just to download everything in the brain and
right.
identify it and sort it out for me.
Yeah. So the conference sounds invigorating. You've got these ideas. You talk about the Identify, I think was the name of the program, and Uniform, Clean Center of Truth for Data. Mm-hmm. If you're a bank leader, how do you take these takeaways? How do you filter them, share them, integrate them into the institution? Do you have any words of wisdom for our audience?
One of the challenges today, I think, and this has been true for the last couple of years, is that a lot of leaders are constantly kind of bombarded with new buzzwords. A couple of years ago, it was the metaverse. Everyone was trying to talk about it and think, oh my goodness, we're going to have to build a branch in the metaverse. And of course, with ChatGPT, everything became about AI and generative AI. But for leaders, sometimes it can be very easy to look at the negative stories that come out about any new technology or any new platform or any new innovation and use that as kind of an excuse to just put on the brakes and not do anything. I think a lot of times, and I've had a lot of community bankers tell me that our industry is evolving so quickly that sometimes you get overwhelmed. How do you identify what to choose, what to prioritize? Because you've generally got boards of directors, you've got folks in your C-suite that many of them have been doing banking for 20 years, 30 years, sometimes longer. We all know as human beings, we get locked into behaviors and habits that sometimes can be very hard to break. And so I guess the only advice I really give is continue to question, continue to lean in and learn. The most important thing at this time right now is sharing information, kind of bringing everybody up in terms of, not just holding some of this information about innovations and new ideas and what's happening with AI, et cetera. Share that for your whole team. Democratize it a little bit. Make sure that you're dealing with people's questions and concerns as they come up, as opposed to letting that all be underneath the surface. I think a lot of it's just about shining the spotlight on the information and making sure everybody's educated. Because honestly, even through some of the core providers right now, they're bringing new artificial intelligence tools online that, folks are already using AI, but they don't realize it, especially in the security realm and fraud prevention. But I think it's important to just block out some time each week to, read another article, read another white paper, listen to a video. And if you don't have time for the video, one of the great things is there are AI tools out there right now where you can take that video, put the link into it, and it'll summarize it for you. So instead of sitting there and listening to the entire video, it'll summarize it and you can go through that in 3 to 5 minutes. It's such an exciting time, right?
It is. We have a lot in common, Jim. We believe in time blocking. We believe in ongoing professional development, ongoing perpetual growth. If you're mowing the lawn, if you're on a walk, if you're in your car, if there's all these opportunities around you for an audiobook, for a book, sitting on your couch, for a podcast while you're on the train. wherever you are while you're doing something else to be feeding your mind. We believe that financial advisors, we want to be a change agent inside of community banks. And we want to help bring more proactivity, more advice-driven, fiduciary type of financial leadership.
Okay.
And we have a saying that our job is communication and leadership. So how do we communicate in leadership and provide leadership throughout the enterprise? And those are similar things to what you just said. The leader comes back from, whether it's the Community Bankers Association of Illinois or Texas bankers or Wisconsin bankers or Kentucky bankers, they come back with ideas, let your light shine, share it throughout the institution, get people together. I love that concept, because we come back and your inbox is full and you've got, right, your desk is a mess and you feel stressed out. And then you say, I'm going to dig out of this stuff and bring these great ideas up on Wednesday. And it gets delayed and put off and not shared. And then a week later, you don't have as much enthusiasm. So come back with the enthusiasm.
I have to tell you, I was out in Seattle, where our home office is, a couple of weeks back, because there was a small conference going on out there that I had the privilege to speak to, of communication directors from all of the state banking associations. So you were talking about some of those in the center part of the country. There were representatives from all over the country. And one of the things I was sharing with them is a little bit about how all of our consumption patterns have changed in terms of how we process email, how we look at our texts, and all the rest. And at one point, I said to the audience of these communication directors, by the way, I hope you understand that data suggests to us that nobody's reading your emails. And there was this unison yes back to me. We know that because we are living in a time where all of us, regardless of our profession, there's so much information and it's all happening so quickly. There's the old adage about we're trying to drink from a fire hose. Now, really finding those 2 or 3 sources that you can always block out time for becomes that much more critical, because, again, over the course of this week, I looked even in my spam filter, there were probably 300 emails. So it's the one thing that I know is that the brilliant thing that community bankers can still do, even in digital space, is keep that human connection vibrant, to make sure that we don't lose that in this highly digital time. And I think when I first met your colleague, Anne, I had shared an image of a young girl talking to her grandparents on a Zoom call. Great image of her, very animated. And I used that as a way to remind folks of a conversation I had with another banker. Somehow we got talking about our mobile phones and how we hardly ever use those for an actual phone. And he started to laugh and he said, I just had a memory of my first interaction with a phone. I said, yeah, what was it? He said, it was a rotary dial party line phone. And we both chuckled, and because we were old enough to know what those were. And it reminded me that for little girls right now, that Zoom call with their grandparents, that's their rotary dial party line phone. The technology will never be any worse. It will never be any older, never be any slower. And the same is true of all of these new digital technologies. I just heard the head of OpenAI say that ChatGPT right now is the dumbest model it will ever be. So I don't know if you've ever heard of Ann Webb. She's involved with South by Southwest. I really encourage you to kind of look her up. Her speech from this spring's South by Southwest was really brilliant. And one of the things she lays out is that the world of 2050 is going to look ways in which we can't even conceive of fully in our day-to-day lives right now. But it's important for us to embrace that all of us, regardless of our age, we are living in a transitional generation right now, where we are going to be the ones that shape what that world looks like. And those kind of reminders, I think, are very important because it helps us remember that we have to look at how we plan for the future through a different set of filters. We can't base our strategies in the same business models and ways that we approached things 10 years ago. We have a new responsibility.
Very interesting. So a lot of times companies, not just financial institutions, are tied to this quarter's numbers. They're tied to my shareholders' dividend. They're tied to the gold star on the quarterly P&L, right? Any advice for community financial institutions on how to look at investing in these future ideas? We talked about investing their time. Make sure you go to these meetings. Make sure you're feeding your mind. You're listening to podcasts. You're seeking out authors. But any advice on investing financially?
One of the things that I think becomes increasingly important, I actually talk quite a bit about this at state associations around the country. We are at a pretty pivotal time demographically in our country right now, where, we've known for several years that the aging of America is going to radically change how our financial system operates. There are community banks right now that we've worked with, and I'm sure that you've worked with, where could be 60, could be 70% of their deposit holders are 65 and older. Some are 75 and older. And we know kind of where that story ends. We know we talk a lot about the transfer of wealth that's coming. We often talk about it in terms of generational transfer of wealth, as opposed to remembering one of the realities that the first transfer is going to happen from men to women, right? It's going to happen between spouses first. And right now, not a lot of investment is being made in even that next transfer, dealing, because so many institutions are thinking about a very masculine approach to kind of dealing with financial advice and dealing with wealth management and dealing with those concepts that have been so dominated by men for generations. And now women are going to be looking for new partners to help them sort this thing out. And one of the things that financial institutions, they not only need to kind of recalibrate how they look at the money that they spend on bricks and mortar as opposed to their digital technologies. I think every institution needs to continually revisit that. They need to look at their branch data. They need to make really smart choices about how they're deploying their capital to make sure that they can continue to evolve in the digital age. But they also need to think about how they need to adjust to the new behaviors and new profile of the larger consumer public. And not a lot of them are doing that right now.
So we need to invest digitally. We need to invest in staff training and making sure that we have high quality staff.
Absolutely.
That can communicate the way that our customers need communicated and lead the way our customers need led in this changing world. Do you have any words of wisdom to strengthen the backbone of a bank president or credit union president that has to say, we want to invest in these areas, but they go to the board and the board says, but we're not going to lose money. We're not going to take a step back. We're not going to reduce our dividend. How do you help them get over that?
Generally, their data will show a picture of a trajectory that will help them understand that if they don't do those things, they will not be positioned for growth. Because whether it's because of the age of their customer base or the age of their tech stack or the age of their internal staff, that without continual investment, there's going to be a diminishing return at some point. You're going to start losing deposits. You're going to start losing customers. I mean, the honest fact is, I think if a leader is really honest, one of the hardest things to do, I think, is make that investment and do something differently at a time when you're still making money doing the same business model, when you're doing things precisely the way you always have for 20 years. Now, you may not be making as much, your margins are shrinking, all the rest, but if you're still doing okay, you have to think longer term, because the changes we're going to see in the next decade are really going to reshape this industry in our country. I have absolutely no doubt about.
Yeah. Very good. Understand your data, understand your people, understand your technology, think bigger and think long term. That requires a higher level of calorie burn, right? Your body, your brain have to be thinking, have to be sharp, have to be intentional. That you can't be autopilot. This is the way that it is. Otherwise, the data. But by the time you realize the data has moved against you, your bank will be closing or sold.
You're absolutely right, Mike. I mean, it's the kind of situation these days where there's so much that is just on the cusp of changing. And I think one of the reasons why at various conferences, whether it's Finnovate, whether it's Money 2020, whether it's any state association conference, I think there's a little bit of panic going on right now. There's a little bit of realization that, oh my word, we really have lost more deposits than we counted on. We don't know quite how we're going to recoup some of those. There's that realization that they're not necessarily attracting the next generation of customers in. So again, there's a lot of recalibration, but I think it's always important to stop people first and say, okay, pause long enough to really take an honest look at where you're at, right? And from there, you can begin to prioritize. You can begin to make better strategic choices. A lot of folks, again, are so overwhelmed with everything that's going on in the industry. The best they can do is come up with a plan that's tactical, not necessarily strategic. I think the greatest challenge for any leader right now is to think strategically. How is what you're doing going to position yourself in relationship to the competition that exists in the world right now? That's the challenge. And that's also the opportunity.
That's fantastic. That last 30 seconds summarizes this whole interview, Jim. Pause from time to time, recalibrate, prioritize. Those were great words. Great intentionality that's required. Yeah, I love it. We need to wrap up, but is there anything else you'd like to add to those comments? Because they were very powerful.
There is one little bit of advice, and it's simply this: don't be discouraged. There's when so much of the world around us is shifting, it can be very easy to either isolate ourselves from all of the noise and not kind of lean into it. And it can also be very discouraging. I know there are bankers that have seen their returns diminish. They've seen deposits go away. I think back to last year when Apple Savings rolled out, and billions of dollars were moving within the industry like overnight with a couple of clicks. Don't be discouraged. Know that you have partners like Midwest Security, as a matter of fact, that can help you do things differently without kind of losing your identity. The core of who you are as a community-based institution that really is your value proposition. We're going to keep it human, folks. We're going to keep it local.
Absolutely. I love it. We've had a banker say something similar, that if you don't have a wealth management solution that is local and engaged in your bank and with or your credit union, with your customers, with your members, when customers have those other inklings to have a different product or service, they go somewhere else. If you have a wealth management division inside of your institution, they go down the hall. When they go down the hall, you keep the relationship, and eventually those deposits may come back. But when they go somewhere else outside of your institution, unaffiliated, a digital-only solution, for example, they may never come back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that realization has finally hit home in a lot of communities, in a lot of institutions, a lot of organizations. And it's nice to know that there are still partners out there that are willing to kind of change that up.
Absolutely. You mentioned approach this, don't give up. It's not big things, good things aren't always easy things. They're tough things that have to be kind of fought through, and you may have to convince part of your board and your C-suite, and you may have employees not buy in. There's challenges with change and proactivity. What are some resources that could help strengthen leadership in these institutions? Are there any resources that you'd point out that you could point leaders to get more knowledge, perspective, peer groups? The associations, state associations I mentioned earlier are one way, but are there any others that you'd recommend?
Well, I think there are, again, some larger associations like ABA, American Bankers, like ICBA. You've got institutions right now. As a matter of fact, at the conference, I was hanging out with a couple of the folks from ICBA's Fintech Accelerator, where they're actually bringing in some of these digital partners, putting them through vetting to help kind of accelerate and make accessible some of these technologies. But I think more importantly, there are podcasts like Breaking Banks and Jim Marusa's podcast, Banking Transformed, that are not only providing great content, but they're pointing to studies, again, and white papers that are really solid sources of information. Alchemy Tech does some great work. They're looking through the lens of, once again, how can we help the community-based institution continue to compete, continue to stay vibrant? I think just doing a little web research, finding some of those resources, I think can be very helpful.
Yeah, that's great. Midwestern Securities, probably just like Market Insights, we want to be an extension of the financial institutions' teams. We want to be an extension of their boardroom, an extension of their C-suite, an extension of their training staff. There's a lot of resources. You just have to look for them. They're out there. They can help. Thanks for pointing some of those out. Jim, this has been really good. I think we could go on for hours.
We probably could.
Yeah, but thank you for joining us. For our audience, if they'd like to learn more about you or follow up with you, what's the best way to reach you?
Go to our website, formarketinsights.com, and that's FOR, marketinsights.com. Probably the longest URL on the planet. But that's the best way to get to me, because there are links there to my LinkedIn, to my email, all the rest. Always happy to talk. And actually, if you just want to kick an idea around, that's what it's about. Sharing information, sharing the kind of inspiration sometimes that can help move the dial.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for being so gracious with your knowledge and expertise. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So on behalf of all of us at Midwestern Securities and Banking on Growth, thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to our next podcast together. Thank you.
This has been another insightful journey with Banking on Growth with Michael Graham and Midwestern Securities, a member of FINRA and SIPC. We appreciate your time. If you found value in today's discussion, consider subscribing for more thought-provoking discussions in the world of finance. Your support helps us continue to bring you quality insights. If you have a topic you'd like us to consider covering or have thoughts on one of our episodes, we'd love to hear it. Just email us at media@midwesternsecurities.com. Remember, the power to grow is within you. Thank you for being a part of the Midwestern Securities community. Until next time, stay inspired and keep banking on growth.